Hey, what is up guys? Evan Aldo here. Wanted to reflect a little bit in this video of my last year on YouTube and all that. You know, how the channel has grown, and it's gotten big, bigger. 11,000 subscribers. You know, it's not a crazy amount, but I'm happy with the way it's growing. Some people have said, it deserves a lot more subscribers, a lot more views. Yeah, sure, I agree. I'm not in the most like clickbaity, type stuff. There's other ways you could do it to probably get more eyeballs, but I don't do that too often. Year ago, if you guys are not familiar, CryptoFace made a video about me, kind of giving me a shout out, talking about how he liked my TA using his indicator, and that's what first blew me up. I had about 400 subscribers at the time. A lot of that was from a previous documentary I made that went viral, so it wasn't even crypto related. I don't know what I would have had without that documentary at that point. Maybe 50, 100, maybe even less. I don't know. It would have been far less. But yeah, special thanks to him. Obviously, that was huge. And I remember a year ago, that's when I was doing like a lot of, that's where I was really learning about law of attraction, really learning about a lot of money, making ways. I mean, I lived in LA before I moved to Florida, back to Florida. I originally went to college down here, lived down here for some years. Was in LA for a year, and that was, it was mainly during the pandemic, so a lot of things were closed. And what was funny, like California was like the only state that had these like such strict like restrictions. Like everything was closed so much longer there than like everywhere else, especially like gyms and all that. So those were kind of a lot of the negative points. And I went out there for a job, and I didn't really know too many people out there, and it was obviously, maybe there were pros and cons to the pandemic, I guess. It was probably harder to kind of meet people, obviously, because of that. But it still was a great time. I mean, I just read and listened to audiobooks, and just drove around and explored California for a long time, for all the weekends, stuff like that when I wasn't working. And I learned a lot, and that is a beautiful state. I mean, it's a shame kind of how the government has gotten out there, and how the taxes are so outrageously high, and how, it's really only great place if you're really rich or really poor. It's probably not the best for the middle class anymore, but you see kind of the history of it, especially like the suburban, like American, the American stereotype, like that suburban American feel, because LA is just a huge suburb. And it kind of feels so American in my opinion. Like In-N-Out Burger is so good. And like you go up to Thousand Oaks or some areas like that, Orange County, just that suburbia, beautiful places. I mean, you look at I would say there's probably three counties like in the US that are just like God's land. They're just, so nice. They're very wealthy, and they're just, very nice, elitist, motivating places. And three of those, in no particular order, are probably Fairfield County, Connecticut, Palm Beach County, Florida, and Orange County, California. Just very wealthy, very motivating. I remember, like, I didn't grow up in Fairfield County, Connecticut. I grew up in Connecticut, if you're not familiar, but I went to high school there, not in a real rich part, but I would always drive around there and explore that area and just see those, see those very rich houses. And I remember I was talking to somebody once, and he was telling me, like, he's a little bit older. I mean, he was telling me like, oh man, when I see that, it's just like depressing, because I'm never going to be able to own that. And I would I feel like the view you want to have is kind of use that as motivation. I feel like a rich person, he kind of uses that, or a person who's going to be wealthy kind of uses that more as motivation. And a poorer person, a person who's more negative, would use that more as depressing. Oh, I'm never going to have this. I'm not worthy enough. I'm a peasant, yada, yada, yada. So, it's a lot about mindset. It really is a lot about mindset, the way, people perceive things. And there's kind of like the way you see that, when you see these houses, you see all of this, it's a lot of visualization, like visualizing yourself having that. Just deciding what you want is big too. Deciding, what you want. I wouldn't say, don't say, I am rich, or I want to be rich. Say I have the amount of money I want. What is it? You know, is it $1 million? Is it $100,000? Is it $10 million? What number are you looking for? You know, what's the main thing to look for? And kind of act like you already have it. Those are, you know, big principles, And, you know, you don't need to, I think one of the things I, you know, struggle with, I overthink things too much. You know, it's not as hard as many make it out to be. A lot of people may tell you, you know, you need to work, you know, unlimited amount of hours to make money. A lot of that's nonsense. I mean, unlimited hours, you know, like a ton of work very, very hard. A lot of that is kind of fluff when people brag about how hard they work. Anybody who brags about how hard they work and yells at you about, I know a few people like that, they're usually full of crap, because think about it, the people that work the hardest, they're not telling everybody that. Their accomplishments speak for themselves, you know. That's what you got to realize. It doesn't, I know Joseph Murphy in his book, The Power of the Subconscious Mind, this is probably one of the latest books I've read. You know, he talks about, you don't need, it doesn't need to be really painful and really miserable to be very successful. You know, you don't need to do that. There's a lot of ways where it doesn't have to be that difficult. And if you are very miserable, if you are, you know, if you're working a job that you hate, all these type of things, you want to kind of look around a little bit more. You're probably doing something wrong. That's what I would say. You know, I came from a normal job before. I didn't like it at all. It was very monotonous. I mean, there were some cool things I learned, but you know, you don't have really much freedom, even in a 9-to-5 job where you're making, say, I don't know, what's the height? I mean, there's ones that obviously pay $1 million a year if you're very, very high up, but you know, 400,000 or 500,000, 300,000. I think that's what the hedge funds, you know, the hardest hedge funds to get into probably would start you at 300,000-400,000 in New York City. You got to realize too, if you're in New York City, the taxes, cost of living, that's probably like, I don't even know, but I mean, if you're making 300 grand in New York City, that may be only like making 150 in Florida, maybe, in terms of buying power, and in terms of after taxes, all that, maybe 200. It's less in terms of how much you could save and all that. So that's what you really gotta, you know, think about. It's not how much money you make, it's about how much money you keep. You know, if you're making $1 million a year, but you're taxed at 80%, you're only really keeping 200,000. That's what you gotta, that's one of the biggest things I learned about too. I learned about that a lot from Robert Kiyosaki. I read a lot of his books, listened to a lot of those audiobooks while I was driving around. I remember when I was driving back from Phoenix, Arizona to LA, I listened just in one shot basically to Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And there's a lot I learned in that. It was, I mean, I don't know if he had a ghost or if he did it himself, somebody helped him with that, but that is a good piece of work. Like, that was done that's probably his best book by far, and the obvious, because it sold so many copies, it made him, you know, very obviously a good part of his portion of his wealth probably came from his books, obviously. I mean, I don't know exactly, don't quote me on this. I mean, I'm sure a lot of it came from real estate as well, but it's a, you know, it's there's both there, obviously. You know, when you're selling millions of copies of a book, I would think you're making millions of dollars. I don't know how much. It's probably at least a couple bucks per sale that the author would get out of all that. But yeah, I mean, it was so engaging. I was just able to listen to it in one shot, and I didn't like get bored of it really at all. Just one shot in the drive. It's probably a 6-hour drive from like Phoenix to back to LA. And that was like, so I was just thinking about it. Like, one of the things I learned from it, you know, a poor person says, I can't afford that. A rich person says, how can I afford that? You know, you're thinking, what can I do to be able to afford that? Because it's not really, you know, people would say, you can't do this, you can't do that. Well, you know, they're right if they say you can't fly, you know, without some type of device that will make you fly, you know, laws of gravity, things of that nature. But, you know, if they're telling you you can't do something just because it's unlikely, that's where it gets a little weird. I mean, I would think too, like most of the things people try, like the failure rates are very high for pretty much everything. I mean, even people who try to become doctors, people who try to become lawyers, you know, how many times do people change their majors in college? I changed mine a few times at least. I mean, everybody was asking me, could I graduate in time? And the answer was yes. I mean, I did 2 majors and 2 minors in college. It wasn't anything too hard though. I was a broadcast major, broadcast journalism, but it was a pretty good school for it. I mean, Miami had it was not the easiest program, and you know, I did very well in it. And political science as well, that was a lot easier. That was not like probably like at least 5 times as easy, just given, and I knew I had a lot of knowledge of that. It came kind of easy to me as well. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of people change their minds. A lot of people don't know. And I think kind of, you know, the main thing people would tell you too, in terms of, so law of assumption, law of vibration, law of attraction, those 3 laws are the main things people talk about for, you know, gaining wealth. Law of assumption, assuming you have it and it will happen. Kind of like assuming, you know, abundance of something else. I mean, assuming you're going to have water, you know, something that's provided to you in the first world very easily, like clean water, or most of the world now for that aspect, for what am I trying to say? You know, most of the world now in modern time, how people would perceive it, very readily available, clean water, you know, bottled water or reverse osmosis, whatever, to clean tap water. Although a lot of people have been talking very negatively about the tap water, and it would make sense, kind of a lot of the things they're talking about in tap water. I try to drink like spring water in glass bottles. This is kind of irrelevant, you probably don't care, but that's another thing I've been reading about, you know, because you got to think about tap water. Even though it's safe to drink, it still goes through all these pipes and all this stuff. You're probably better off with like a fresh, you know, spring water source, or like, you know, reverse osmosis, those type of things. I don't own a house now, but if I were to own a house and live in one, I'd probably do reverse osmosis or something like that. I mean, other things, solar panels to be off the grid, you know, more and more things to be sustainable and to be dependent on yourself rather than somebody else. Because, you know, like somebody like Jason Casper will say, you grow your own food. There's a lot of power in that, you know, a lot of things. Be as off the grid as possible. Or, you know, you could go to a different place where life is a little bit better for what you're looking for. You know, I'm gonna go out to Costa Rica next month. I don't know how long I'm gonna stay, or if I'm gonna live there or move there or whatever, but we'll see. You know, we'll see how I like it. I really liked Mexico when I was there, and exploring other places to possibly live in. And I believe they're doing something with taxes, Costa Rica, like a nice visa for business owners, which would be really nice too. I've heard very, very good things about Costa Rica, so I'm excited. That's another thing too. You want to be excited for what's yet to come. You want to feel like, there's a YouTube channel. This guy I've been watching since he just started making videos. This was right when around the time when I was getting into law of attraction, and when CryptoFace gave me the shout out at my channel. You know, got 5,000 subscribers or whatever from him. First 5,000, that's a big number. And E.O. Locker Jr. is the name of the channel. He's got well over 100,000 subscribers now. I think he had, when I first started watching him, 10, 20,000, maybe even less. Not that big. And he had a lot of really good content, a lot of good exercises that I learned from him. And I think it kind of had a lot to do with a lot of the success I had, you know, in the last year. And, you know, when I graduated college, I was one of these people. It was just, I never saw myself really working kind of a real job. I always saw myself as real successful. And that's one of the, you know, being independent, that's entrepreneur, whatever. I didn't know much about entrepreneurship or any of the stuff I know now. But I just saw myself as being really successful. I don't know why exactly. I remember in college, people used to always say, like, you know, we got to party now, do all this now, because we're not going to do it after. We're just going to be working crappy jobs or whatever. And I used to think to myself, sometimes I would probably say this, but I used to think to myself a lot of times, like, nah, it's not going to be me. It doesn't have to be like that. I hope it, you know, really doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to. I know it doesn't have to. And I spent a lot of time listening to like Tim Ferriss, learned a lot from him. Joe Rogan in the early days when he was, you know, when probably 2017, 2018, when people were just starting to find out about him, before he really became like a household name now almost. I think, you know, in the person's prime, when they're starting out, they're kind of usually the best, and then it kind of gets repetitive after a while. I haven't listened to Rogan lately, but I'm sure he says, you know, a lot of really good content recently. It's just, it got like just way too mainstream, you know, with the CNN controversy and all that. I wish he was able to, but that's what happens when you get big. You know, sometimes you wish you're able to stay under the radar and just keep your fringe following and avoid becoming just so mainstream and just so, you know, everybody watching you. And, you know, it was interesting with everything happening with the, you know, the censorship kind of for the first time. There's just the extreme censorship happening and all of that. That was one of the, you know, through that time, I remember listening to London Real, Brian Rose a lot during that time when I was living in California during the pandemic and learning, you know, just so much. And I found out about Dr. Bruce Lipton because he was on, this was through 2019, 2020, even into 2021, found out, well, going back to when I graduated college, didn't really have a job. There was a news reporting job that I took and quit after 2 days, just realized I didn't want to do it, which in hindsight, really good idea, but because it worked out, you know, really well now. But you know, at the time, it looked pretty terrible. There was a few other things I tried. I tried a lot of things during that time too, and mainly just nothing really went anywhere. You know, nothing really went anywhere. And then I took a job as a paralegal in LA. And the thing too is usually you get the things in life, the lowest you're willing to settle for. You know, probably that job in LA, you know, it was a decent job. I got lucky because the pandemic rents were really cheap for a short period of time, like a month or two, and I got such a tremendous deal, man. Like I probably, in terms of like, you know, obviously a paralegal salary, usually you wouldn't be able to afford your own like one bedroom in LA and still have money to save up. So I got lucky because of that. And a lot of that money that I made, you know, the money I had, I put all into crypto. This was in 2020, you know, later 2020, when I heard Naval Ravikant on Tim Ferriss's podcast kind of give a wink, wink, I think we're going to go up or whatever. I forget the way he said it, but you know, that was one of the big catalysts on how I made a lot of money, especially with Ethereum, buying that at $300. And that was like all the money I was making, I was kind of putting into that at the time. And that became kind of, you know, that became a jackpot. That became a real, and I still, most of that, the majority of the stuff I bought back then, I've never sold. You know, I just have held on to for that time, just forever and ever. And, you know, there's different views that I don't want to make, you know, I talk about more of this stuff, when to sell, when to buy, that type of stuff in other videos. So I'm not going to go on that, but that was, you know, if I wasn't listening to all this stuff, absorbing all this stuff, I probably wouldn't have known to get into crypto real heavy at that time. Probably wouldn't have known that. I got in, obviously not at the bottom, but I got in at the time where it just went straight up. That's like the best, when you get in and it just goes straight up. Oh boy, because that was wild. Towards the end of 2020 into 2021, that was, especially for Ethereum, I mean, well over a 10x. But now you would look and it's less than that, but you know, we'll see. Anyway, you know, going back to what I was saying, I learned, you know, there's a viral video you should watch, or there's, yeah, of Dr. Bruce Lipton talking about, you know, first 7 years of your life, you know, rich families, they tell you you could have everything you want, and poor families, you know, life's a struggle, don't embarrass me, do this, do that. That video I really liked. I remember I found that in 2019, and I remember watching that. I would think to myself a lot of times, like I would think to myself, is it really possible to have what I want in life? You know what I mean? To not have to, you know, be a slave to a job I didn't like, or all this type of stuff, have to show up at a certain time, you know, always, you know, being on call, having to work weekends. And that's how a lot of 9-to-5 jobs are. They ain't fun, believe me. And I was kind of debating it there. I didn't know, because I was seeing, like, I've heard a lot of motivational stuff, and I was always like thinking, like, were these people, you know, like Tim Ferriss and all these people I listened to who had a lot of money and did what they want, you know, on most of their days, I would think, were they just very lucky, or was there something more to that? You know what I mean? Was I able to have what, was it possible for me to have what they had, kind of, without, you know, was that possible? And that, there were a few things where the Dr. Bruce Lipton, that video, watching him on London Real, that helps me out quite a bit. It was very intriguing. And then I didn't really know, you know, I didn't know much about, I never even heard actual law of attraction until 2021. Like, I think I learned about it from Carl from the Moon, really, of all, you know what I mean? A lot of people know about it. I never really heard about it before that. I heard, you know, from Dr. Bruce Lipton, he was talking about it, but I didn't know how to apply it. I didn't know what resources to look at to kind of apply it at those points. I had no clue. So I was just thinking about it. How am I going to do this? You know what I mean? And I found, you know, I watched Joe Dispenza as well, a lot of his stuff. I remember I read that book. I bought that book, Becoming Supernatural, and I read it, and it kind of went over my head at the time. It seemed, you know, I was 22. It seemed almost too complicated. We were just talking about all this, you know, physics, all quantum, what was it, quantum physics? I don't even know. You don't really need to know that to understand, you know, the law of attraction, but you know, it was all advanced out, and it was like going way over my head, and I didn't really understand like I didn't understand really how to apply it. I definitely learned some stuff from the book, but I didn't understand how to apply it to really get anything that I wanted in my life, if that makes sense. And it was, you know, it definitely, it was eye-opening. And then 2021, I kind of, you know, I just had enough of it. You know, I wouldn't really, people talk about, you know, the common question is, should you quit your job to, you know, all of a sudden try to start a business, something like this? The best advice I could give for that is, you know, if you're going to do that, probably not tell the people around you you're going to do that, because it's going to be negative. You know how the people around you are going to react. If you're surrounded by very positive people who have done that and succeeded at that and maybe succeeded at that, it may be a different story. But if you're around mainly people who think you need to work a job that you hate to have any, you know, chance of living a good life, you're probably, you keep quiet, keep it on the DL, you know, keep it more. That's what I would say. Try to keep it on the DL. Also, I mean, I had, like I said, I put everything I had into Bitcoin and Ethereum mid to late 2020. So I had a good amount of money saved up. I had money to last probably a couple years if I was, you know, pretty frugal with it. You know, I mean, living in LA, maybe only a year, but in Florida, you know, especially, you know, versus paying $4,000 a month for a one bedroom versus paying, you know, $1,500 in Florida, something like that, or $2,000, would have been able to last quite a bit longer. So I had time to do it. So I had a lot of comfort, you know. It was, and I was young enough where I was, how old was I? 24 at the time, I believe. And, you know, I was just thinking, like, a lot of people in the late 20s have nothing. A lot of people are in a lot of debt. If I just mess this up, it doesn't, you know, trading and all the things I was trying to do, YouTube plus trading, if I mess this up and, you know, worst case scenario, I would have, you know, lost a lot of money. So I didn't like go anything too crazy. I mean, for trading, I know they say a lot of people lose a lot of money in the beginning. I blew out a lot of small accounts, you know, $500 accounts, $1,000 accounts. I wasn't putting crazy amounts of money in and just, you know, going all into that, because I knew kind of how it worked, and I kind of got a system. And, you know, market structure, I'm not going to talk about it in this vlog, but market structure changes. You know, you always got to be honing things every few months. There's different environments. And I'm learning more and more about it. That's the thing too with the crypto trading. I mean, it's something with crypto in general, it's something so new that no one really knows too much about it. So if you just know, you know, 10% more about it than the average person, you know, you're kind of a genius almost. That's the advantage you have if you learn something new. I think in Naval's book, or Naval's, like, yeah, Navalmanac, I think it's called, or whatever, Naval Ravikant's book or whatever, he talks about it in the How to Get Rich, like, podcast type of thing. You know, if you're in a field that's very new that no one really knows about, you could have an advantage. You know, you could be kind of have the advantage that somebody with a PhD in, you know, finance would have if you just studied crypto for a few months when no one really knew about it. You get what I'm saying? Kind of like that. You have that advantage. So that was big. That was how I kind of found out. And then the other thing too is, like, all these things, you know, gambling, day trading, cryptocurrency, anything like pretty risky like that, it's going to attract, you know, one of two people who are kind of ignorant, don't want to put much work in, just want to gamble with it, or people who really want to learn about it and really want to see if there's a possibility to have a chance to make it. And, you know, it always intrigued me when I remember, like, when I was hearing, I think Dave Ramsey say, like, of all people, Dave Ramsey, but him saying, like, 80% of day traders fail. And I was thinking, like, that's not, like, that's good odds. You only have to be better than 80% of people that try this. I mean, just to think about, like, the average person going into any field is usually pretty ignorant on it in the beginning. I mean, I feel like and people quit so quickly. I felt like it didn't have to, you know, be that difficult to be better than 80% of people. We know for, like, crypto leverage trading, it's probably less than that. It's probably less than a 20%. I don't know the exact number, but it's probably less than that actually succeed at it. But, you know, the fact that there was kind of that possibility was that you know, that chance there kind of intrigued me. Also, I mean, there were different, you know, different avenues to do it, and different ways, you know, different things to look at. So started that, you know, going back to like 2019, 2020, I took that job in LA. That was even like, now I'm just looking back, kind of visualization too, because I didn't have a job in most of 2019. I was kind of, you know, my parents were pretty disappointed in me. A lot of people kind of saw me, you know, were kind of disappointed in me. I remember I was, how about this like thing to use as an ice bath at my father's house. I would just do like ice baths. I was doing a lot of like good health things, working out, and I was, you know, it's crazy. I was like happy, you know, I was proud of myself. I was just looking back at everything I accomplished, even though I had no job, no money, anything. I was kind of proud of myself at all the things I accomplished. I was happy with, you know, what I did. It didn't matter what anybody else thought. I was happy with what I accomplished. You know, it's kind of, you know, irrelevant with whatever anyone else thinks. If you're happy, that's all that really matters a lot of times, as long as you're not hurting anybody else, you know, as long as you're being ethical, I would say. And, you know, at that point, went out to LA to look at actually some law schools, because that's what I was thinking of doing back then. And remember, I looked at USC, UCLA, and I liked LA to a certain extent back then. And then all of a sudden I got this, and I was applying for quite a few jobs, could never find anything, even paralegal jobs. And then all of a sudden I got this real good one in LA that hired me like so easily. And I don't know, I feel like it was a lot of visualization of possibly being in LA, living in LA. I think that's what it was, like a big part of it. So yeah, I mean, a lot of the things you think about, you know, come up in your life, and it's easy to forget about that too, because we're always thinking in logic, we're always thinking in, you know, they can't be, but a lot of your thoughts really, I think, dictate what happens. A lot of the experiments too, I've experimented with just throwing a baseball, throwing a football, you know, visualizing that, like simple things that your brain isn't going to tell you, like, no, you can't do that, it's impossible. You know, start out with something simple, like, you know, maybe just getting $1,000, you know, something simple like that, something you would be able to do already, but it just comes up, which is very, very interesting. Okay, this round of cars is going around in a circle, beeping at each other. Okay. But yeah, they're going this way. You know, think about that in that aspect. Wait till they go by. And yeah, it's just, you know, you're thinking about that and the things that come up, you know, a lot of different ways. I mean, think about the thing you want. Say it, you know, was it $10 million? I have $10 million. I have this, I have that. And try to, you know, suppress that voice, change that inner dialogue. You know, change that inner dialogue that says, no, I can't have it, that's impossible, because it's not impossible. What's impossible is probably really defying the laws of physics in certain ways, but even then, you know, it's always impossible until someone did it. They always talk about the example with the 4-minute mile. It was always, you know, seemingly impossible to run a mile in under 4 minutes, and then somebody did it, and the next people did it. You know, it's a lot of visualization, just the belief of it. There's a lot of that powerful placebo effect, and you kind of create your own reality. You know, you're accountable for what happens at the end of the day. It's nobody, and that's a good thing too, because if you're not accountable and you make a ton of money, then it's just somebody else. Somebody should say, oh no, that wasn't yours. Somebody else did that. You know what I mean? Somebody else built that for you. But if you're accountable, then it goes on you. If you succeed or if you fail, it goes accountable on you. That's the main thing for it. So I think that's, you know, kind of the thing that dictates your luck. A lot of it is the positive thoughts as well. You know, if you're always finding yourself having bad luck, if it always seems like you're having bad luck, you may need to change something in your belief system. You know, your negative thoughts may be overpowering your positive thoughts. I think, you know, I don't know this exactly, one study showed like 80% of the thoughts people think about are negative. You know, but if you have positive thoughts, you may not be that smart, but if you always have positive thoughts, you'll always kind of succeed. I think the example Bruce Lipton gave is like Trump. You know, he didn't really have experience in a lot of the things he did, and he always succeeded for the most part. You know, there's never going to be 100% in life, but he always seems to succeed at them. So that's you know, one of the main things to kind of look for. That's one of the main things to kind of look towards, that aspect of it. And, you know, in changing times, I think, you know, you kind of dictate the reality too, which is kind of nice, you know, to dictate how things are, and you could change things. And I want to reiterate kind of lastly, we're going on 30 minutes, and I want to reiterate kind of lastly, you know, you want to be excited for the future. I think in a lot of instances, being excited for the future, you know, be excited for what's going to happen. I feel like there's some possible good event that could happen that you're thinking about possibly happening. Be excited for that event. Feel like that event has already happened. How would you feel if that event has happened? And sometimes, you know, you think about like, I don't know how I would feel, but you would probably feel excited. Try to feel excited about that. You know, they say get into a drowsy, you know, peace of mind. There's a lot of other, you know, channels that will explain this to you about law of attraction. They probably know a lot more than I know. Drowsy state, and think that, you know, feel that. Meditation can obviously help. I would say go out in nature. That helps too. It's a different vibration. When you explore different places, that could help too. Also, it's getting windy. What was the last thing? There was something I was going to tell you. Oh yeah, Instagram, TikTok, a lot of social media. Try to really limit your time on that. Those things are so addictive, and they just get more and more and more addictive as time goes on. I mean, YouTube's more like longer formatted. I mean, if you could listen to a 31-minute video now the whole way through, chances are you got a pretty good attention span. You don't need to, you know, limit your time on there. But if you're having trouble, you know, you're getting too antsy, just things to look at. You know, take a break. I deleted my, you know, you delete those apps for a week. Instagram, TikTok, delete them just for a week. You can put them back on at any time. It takes 2 seconds to put them back on. Refrain and see how your life, see how things, you know, differ. We have so much constant stimulation now. Take a break from that. And what I always tell myself when I'm gonna delete those apps, take a break from it, I always tell myself, you know, the dopamine detox, I could always, you know, anytime I want, just re-download it if I have to. I could always, you know, just come back at any point if I have to. It's always gonna be there. You know, it's not going away. It's always gonna be there. So I'll leave you guys out with that. Hope you guys enjoyed this vlog. I try to do these every once in a while when I have some good things to talk about. Please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel if you're new. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed it. Have a good one. Goodbye.